Welcome to the Shifted podcast and video series. Each week we connect with teachers to hear their stories about teaching and learning during a global pandemic. We focus on shifting practices, digital tools and resources, health and wellness, maintaining balance, and supporting our students during these challenging times. The Shifted podcast is from the Greater Victoria School District in beautiful British Columbia, Canada, and is recorded on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations.
MCA Asa Yuchelipton, Chilea San Lekwungen. Asiam Nu Jelita, Asiam Nu Shwalakwa, Haishkwa Kwansana Tejal Lekwungen Tanach, Haishkwa Siam Naquilia. And that's a traditional language of our people, the Lekwungen dialect. Good morning, my friends and family. My name is Butch Dick. I'm from the Songhees Nation, the land of the Lekwungen people. And I would like to express a gratitude to the Greater Victoria School District for recognizing the traditional territory. This used to be the territory where other neighboring nations came to harvest herring and smoke herring before they returned to their land. And Lekwungen Tanuk just means the land of the Lekwungen people. So we thank you very much for this opportunity, expressing gratitude for people that come to our territory and visit our territory. And we always lift up our hands to Haishkwasiem.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Shifted podcast and video series. My name is John Hamlin. I work with the Greater Victoria School District here in beautiful, today it's sunny Victoria, British Columbia, which is the traditional home to the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nation, upon whose land we live, we learn, we work. And today we're going to have a great conversation with John Harris and Emma Milliken from our SD61 Indigenous Education Department. Now, John is our Indigenous, or Elder and Indigenous Knowledge Facilitator, and Emma is our Indigenous Learning Support Teacher for secondary schools. And over the course of this series, we've been talking primarily with secondary folks, but one of the themes that has been running through our conversations is how are we maintaining a semblance of community and connection when we're faced with so many challenges to that connection piece. We're not meeting in person the same way we once did. We're not able to connect as easily with individuals. We have all of these different digital tools now that we're connecting with. And while they're fantastic to, connect people in an easy way, you don't get the same level of personal connection that you would if you were sitting in circle or sitting across the table from somebody. So perhaps, Emma, if you don't mind telling me a little bit about what secondary has looked like specifically from your perspective this year, and what ways that you've been trying to maintain connection with your students and your community and I know you're primarily working out of Spectrum and also our Indigenous Ed department here at the district office, but what's that look like for you this year?
So I'm working most of the time out of Spectrum, and it's definitely been much more challenging than normal because a lot of what I do relies on having to make connections with people, with families, with students, with staff members. So just like everybody else, we've had to really rethink how we do what we're doing and get really creative sometimes around making connections with each other and with students and families. I've been really lucky to be able to be part of the district Indigenous team this year, which is really, I know it's helped me personally feel connected to just with a smaller team there. Because at Spectrum, it's just Paul Thomas and I. Paul's the Indigenous counselor that works, but he works at 5 different schools, so he's not there all the time. So it's been also nice to have that connection to other Indigenous, staff that we're meeting. And even now, I'm only there a couple of days a week, and right now we're not even seeing each other very much. But it's just still nice to have that more intimate connection with people that you're working with. So it's definitely been a challenge.
Yeah, you have to kind of take what little connection you have and make the most of it. And how about you, John? I mean, especially
Mm-hmm.
working with elders and elders in community, you're not just going up and sitting down on their couch and having a cup of tea anymore like you may have been in the past. So what's that connection been looking like for you?
Yeah, it's been unique this year, and challenging in many ways. So much of our culture kind of revolves around food and coming together and sharing meals together, and working with elders. They'll always say you go and do the work in person. You never call, you never email, you never Zoom. You go and you talk to the person face to face. And so that's presented some real challenges in working with not only our elders, but how our elders work with their communities. And I think they've been so gracious in this year in their understanding of the situation, that we're in really unique, challenging times. And so when I first started to correspond with them, I would call and say, the first thing I would say is, I know I'm supposed to be doing this in person, but I'm just doing it this way because of the situation we're in. And they would understand that and would be okay with that. But it's far from ideal. But the fact that we have, elder engagement and community engagement is so exciting. That we're able to maintain those connections and those relationships to community. There's been some kind of interesting workarounds when it comes to like food, for example. Last week, they did the recruiting camp for Camosun and UVic. And so what UVic did was they actually sent out to schools the invitation that if they wanted to order food for their students, that they could get reimbursed for it. And so that was a way that they were still able to provide the food for students who were coming together for that event, and do it COVID safely. Similarly, at events that I've been to over the course of the year at schools where we've done different activities with classes that involved coming together for food, we would order, individual kind of prepackaged, like individual pizzas, for example, or prepackaged subs that were ready to go. So, we've had to get a little creative with that, but we've been able to, still maintain some of the semblances of our cultural traditions in the midst of this pandemic, which is good.
Yeah. I'm having flashbacks. This is totally off topic, but I'm having flashbacks to this Bare Naked Ladies song, If I Had $1 Million. And it says, they make pre-wrapped sausages, but they don't make pre-wrapped bacon. But in terms of, there's our random side note for the conversation today. In terms of like students specifically, Emma, I know that there has been probably a higher number of Indigenous students that haven't been connecting with schools as significantly during this pandemic. And I'm just curious in terms of like what you've been doing or what outreach you've been engaged with to try and keep at least something connected to those kids as they're, not showing up in person in schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely been a huge challenge. And part of it too is as families are trying to decide, it's been so difficult, right, to know when to send kids to school, when to keep them home. So there's been a lot of, students will come for a bit and then as watching the numbers, if the numbers get bad, then they pull them back again. So sometimes it's hard to even know who's there, keeping track of who's at school and who's not at school, and how to support that has been definitely one of the biggest challenges this year. But one of the good things that's come out of that actually is that not just for me and Paul, I think what we've done is actually upped our contact with families and with, like if we can't contact families by email or phone, we've actually been going out and knocking on doors and going to people's houses just to make sure, just to keep that contact going and letting people know that we're here and that we're, we haven't forgotten about you. And it hasn't been just Paul and I doing that. There's actually, I've been so, it's just been great because the Spectrum staff have been really good. I think teachers in general with all students at going after those kids that aren't surfacing or aren't appearing in classes, and taking the time to phone and taking the time to, we even have some teachers that have dropped off packages at students' homes. And, still, we did that a lot last spring, which I think helped, as teachers were doing a lot of that and it kind of got them comfortable with it. And so now it's continued this year when students aren't always, able to come into the school for different reasons. Teachers have been really good about volunteering to go drop off stuff at students' houses and homes and just keep the contact going. So I think it just really has been helping with that relationship between our Indigenous families and just the school community, kind of help making that stronger and, letting everybody just feel a little bit easier about being able to do that and having that connection. So that's been a really big plus.
I bet. Yeah. And it's interesting that, potentially at the end of all this, we might emerge with a more close-knit and stronger community than ever before, based on all of the increased level of connection that's had to occur to maintain that throughout the last year. In terms of other, pieces like that, John, specifically with your community connections, and I know that you've, there's a few different projects that we've been involved in getting Elder Butch Dick to do a land acknowledgement and things like that, that we can, support multiple different parts of our school district with those resources. What other things have emerged over the last year within your department that you think, well, these are things we probably will keep regardless of when or where or how the pandemic will end? Like, these are little things that we'd like to maintain moving forward in the long run.
I just wanted to just speak to the question that you had with Emma there a little bit, because I know that I think part of the community connection piece wasn't as difficult of a transition because through social media, really, a lot of families I've worked with in the past and continue to work with, I have on Facebook. And I know that there are some colleagues around the district who have actually started work Facebook accounts to connect with community, at different schools. And so they have their specific Facebook work account, and then they add all of the parents and families that they work with. And that's actually been one of the most effective ways to stay connected and to communicate with community in my perspective. So that hasn't been that difficult of a transition. I've still stayed really connected that way. In terms of things that, have projects and things that have arisen out of this, situation, I think, I look at examples like our Bedwood Box Learning Series, for example, and how we've been able to reach a really broad audience of educators around the region, but also, around the province. It's really exciting to see that these teachings, these messages can be really far-reaching. Usually when we're doing a presentation for like a Pro D event, there'll be anywhere from a dozen to 30 people in the room, which is awesome. But at the last Bedwood Box Learning Series that we did, we had, I think, 90 people in the room, and that was also recorded, and so it's been viewed multiple times as well. So that's really kind of even emphasizing that message even more and broadcasting that message even further beyond our school district, which is exciting. I think it's caused a lot of our colleagues in our department to really connect outside of our school district. We're connecting with colleagues in 62 and 63, out of off island school districts as well. So the amount of connections and the ability to connect through platforms like Zoom and others has really, I think, one area that will stay, maybe not to the same extent, of Zooming 3 or 4 meetings a day and 6 hours of Zooming, but I think I do see those kind of video conferencing opportunities staying for far beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I think even in the first session of the Bedwood Box series, there was well over 100. Like I think I remember seeing the number of being 150 or 160 people that were attending, and there's no way we would have been able to do that in person, back before. In terms of increasing access and transparency as well, it allows people to share that learning, participate at their own schedule. If they couldn't make it at that particular time, if they had life commitments or something that were preventing them from doing that, it still allows them to feel connected to the work that you're doing and see what's happening. And I think, yeah, I would agree with you. I really hope that we, yes, not Zoom all day long, because that Zoom fatigue is real, but yeah, certainly maintain aspects of it, because it's, it really is, I think, a huge asset in our inclusive toolkit in terms of, opening the door to the work that we're doing. So yeah, that's that. And, I was going to mention too, the social media piece as well. And it's true. It's amazing how prolific, especially platforms like Facebook, are in small communities. And for years, I think as educators, we've been a bit afraid to dip our toe into that pool, because there's, it's like having that personal private divide. And, especially when, I know when Twitter first came out, educators are really keen to use Twitter because everything's sort of public. There's nothing, you have messages and things like that, but there's not a lot that's behind the closed doors. Whereas Facebook, there's a lot more of those messages and certain things. But I think it's true that we really need to broaden our scope of communication tools in order to meet people where they're at. So if that's the tool that community is using already, we can't expect them to adapt to our way of communicating. We need to be able to adapt to meet them where they're at. Any additional thoughts from that secondary specific lens on the shift in your role this year, Emma, and perhaps some things that you'd like to maintain moving forward, even once we get through this pandemic on the other end?
Oh, well, I was just thinking, I know, besides just like communication, I know that teachers have had to also become in general, but very flexible around how they do things like deliver their lessons and assess, like assessment, and how they come up with marks. A lot of that's had to really shift and become very quickly. They've had to really broaden how they do everything. So I think that's beneficial for sure, just in how, whether they're doing things remotely or we're sending packages home for kids, or we're just, I think just like say meeting students where they're at. I think that the pandemic has sort of given us license to do that more. And I'm hoping that that will continue for sure, because I really feel like that is going to benefit a lot of our Indigenous students, just as they move through the education system. So I think that's really going to help. That's been a good thing. And I know things like land-based learning, we've been trying to get students outside more and be outside more ourselves. I think that's across K to 12. It's been a little more challenging, I think, for grade, high school, because we're so classroom-based. But again, I think that shift in thinking is good too. So trying to think about how we can be outside more, how we can be on the land more. I know like John and Dave Davidson have, and a number of other people have been doing a lot of outdoor ed and land-based learning kind of series and things. So I just think that that's, again, we're going towards a more Indigenous approach when we do that. And we look at what land-based learning even means and how effective it is and ways we can use it. Again, I really hope that's going to continue just increasing as we move through this.
Yeah, and I think, with the quarter system at secondary too, we really have so much more flexibility to consider approaches like that, because, when you're doing a class for 80 minutes, the transition time to be outside and all that, it's tight. You're trying to squeeze everything into a short period of time. But when you stretch that out significantly, I think that really does present multiple different entry points and opportunities to try out new things like that. So that's great. That's the way you're thinking. I hope to see more of that in the years to come here. And John,
definitely.
Speaking in terms of what do you think the future looks like for Indigenous education in the next couple of years here in the Greater Victoria School District? I know we've had a little bit of strain on some of our relationships to community due to issues this year. So what do you think the future looks like from your perspective?
Well, I'm excited. I'm really hopeful. I think it was a big shift this year that we went through from our department standpoint, adding positions and adding, capacity really. I think, this work really is so important, and it not only benefits our Indigenous students, but all students in the district. I know I've been to many schools this year where I've been in classes where there were no Indigenous students, and how appreciative the teachers were to have somebody in the classroom, or zooming in or providing some Indigenous knowledge or perspective on education or different topics is so valuable. I think those are the experiences that students remember. And I say that as, a student for 18 years, those were the experiences that I remembered, was the in-person ones, the really personable, relational ones. I've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing classes this year, including, like Emma mentioned, the land-based learning program that David Davidson's helping facilitate. Next week, we're going to be going clam digging, and we're going to gift those to our elders. So a little bit of reciprocity there. And also, because Marianne, or one of our elders, actually came in and shared some beautiful gifts with the class. We spent an hour and a half or 2 hours down at Goldstream, and she just shared some beautiful teachings with them, and also gifted them all with an eagle feather. And so in reciprocity for that, we're going to go out and do some clam digging and gift her some clams, so that to show that we honor that relationship. So that's just one example of many that I can highlight from the year, but there's some really amazing things happening already this year. Growing capacity for presenting, and opportunities for professional learning. I don't think we've offered so many professional learning opportunities in a year that I can remember. And I for working at, various schools over the years, I was always really drawn to opportunities for Indigenous learning and professional learning opportunities. And there would only be maybe one, a Pro D, that was really kind of heavy in that area. So, to be able to provide that now for our staff and around the district, I think is so powerful, and it's empowering. And we've had a really great response from our different sessions that we've run over the course of the year. A lot of gratitude, a lot of connections happening, where historically we haven't had connections at certain schools or areas of the district. For whatever reason, maybe it's because we have less Indigenous students there, we don't have staff in those buildings. We've really created a lot of connections at different schools, which is really encouraging. We're really, I think, you're starting to kind of pull together as a district, in terms of our approach to Indigenous education, which is really important. All of our students, like I said, benefit from it. All of our students deserve that. I always, remind people that the first principles of learning are just good principles of learning, and if we can bring some of that to our school district in various ways, I think everybody's going to benefit from that.
Yeah, that's such a great point to make. And I think it's such a common misconception that First People's principles of learning are about incorporating Indigenous content into classes. And while that can be what it looks like, it's not just that. And like you say, it's often good principles of teaching and learning that you'll open any teaching textbook and you'll find something that very similarly aligns with what you'll see at FPPL. Would you be able to talk a little bit about your carving project at Reynolds?
Yeah, so we did some carving a few months ago, and then just recently again, we did some mini paddles, and then last time, which was a couple of weeks ago, we did even smaller paddles. And so there's a lot of, going back to the First People's principles of learning, really kind of outlines Indigenous pedagogy in many ways. And one of those areas of Indigenous pedagogy is kind of teaching through doing, or teaching through creating. Some of the most impactful teachers that I've had in my years have been teachers who were involving creating artwork, weaving or carving or harvesting. So it was always done through activity. through action. And so that's a really powerful teaching tool that I use to teach students, about like things like the potlatch ban, teaching them about artwork while they're doing artwork, and then teaching them about how all of the artwork was taken over years through the potlatch ban and raids in communities is a really powerful way to convey that message that students can really resonate with. I talk about my family's involvement in revitalizing our art form in Sinanamuk. My grandpa has been going to the archives and uncle for the last 40 years, researching our old designs and bringing those back. And with that comes the language and the stories and the history of our land and our people. So it's actually a resurgence of sorts of culture that is brought back when we do these things. We have other examples of amazing things happening in the district, like the Carrie Newman pole over at Oaklands that I'm helping support right now. We'll be drumming and singing with 60 students at that pole unveiling ceremony in May, which is really exciting. So, there's really great stuff happening. A lot of it, is impacted by our, COVID and our pandemic situation. But that being said, we're a resilient bunch, educators and our communities, and we'll do the best we can with what we have. Yeah. So it's exciting.
Yeah, indeed. Emma, John mentioned events coming up in May. Now there's a Pro D Day coming up at the end of May, and with an Indigenous education focus. Could you give us a little more insight into what we can expect to be on offer on that day here?
Well, I think we're still just working on that right now. So I'm kind of hammering out the finer points of what we're actually going to be doing. And I know schools are also working on their own, we have a meeting at Spectrum to talk about what's coming up at Spectrum for May as well. So I know we're going to be having offerings like from the district in May, but then also I think schools are also working on their own things that they want to focus on as well, which is really good. That it can be led from either place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. John, do you know any more details about that? Like
we don't need to do spoilers, but
yeah, there's definitely a few things in the works. I've been corresponding with various kind of community partners and people who are working with our department closely on some offerings. I know that they'll be offering, like the Bentwood Box series that have been recorded and archived. They'll be showing those again if you'd like to engage with that. I just had a teacher actually message me on Monday saying she was just watching it for the first time and how awesome it was. So that was, great. And I know that there's still, teachers don't have a lot of time to be, doing that type of stuff. So any chance they get, they really are grateful for that. So it's nice just with these Pro Ds to be able to slow down and take some time and do some, some self-care work, some professional learning, because I know we all really need that given this, the circumstances. But unfortunately that day I was hoping to be able to present something, but I'm supposed to be doing a Sterner's canoe with Sonia over at Shoreline, so we can start expanding that big canoe program there. So,
well, that's still a really exciting project.
Yeah.
Makes me think learning requires patience and time, right?
That's right.
So yeah, exactly.
Do you two have any closing thoughts or things you'd like to share before we wrap things up today?
I just wanted to kind of reiterate what you and John were talking about there about all that kind of work he's doing around the polls and the all that cultural work that's still been going on. I know over the last year there's sometimes been a feeling like teachers are just in not just teachers, educators, any of the staff that's working, people have just been in kind of survival mode sometimes and not feeling like they have a lot of energy or time to do anything extra as far around a lot of extra Pro D stuff. And yet, like like we're saying with the Bentwood Box series and different things that we've had going on, I think people have still been really wanting to do all the things that are going on. And, that's just the teachings that I have from my own culture and my family are kind of what have gotten me through a lot of this, which is really just about being connected to people. The connections are so important. Yes, of course, the curriculum is really important and the learning is important. But I think as we, like over the next year or two, we're going to have to be doing a certain amount of recovery with students who haven't been able to be in schools, or who have, there are going to be gaps in some of the learning. And I think just making sure students know that there's always a place for them at the school, in our district, at the schools, that there are people who care about them, that the families know they're not, they're belonging, and that they're part of our, our bigger family. I just think that connection piece is so important for students and staff, just to get us through this, and that it's okay. Like even with the quarter system, I know teachers were kind of stressed because we had to cut out some of what we would normally do. There wasn't the same amount of time for all of the learning and the teaching. So a lot of teachers were feeling that pressure of, well, what do I cut out of my course here? It's all important. But I think the big lesson when you stand back is the relationships are really important. So as long as you're making your classroom welcoming for students and you let them know that they're cared about, and you make the teaching that you do meaningful, then it's all going to be okay. The patience and time is a really big piece of that. But yeah, we'll get there together. We'll get there eventually. But and it's okay that it's not going to look perfect. It's really mostly about knowing that you're part of a family and that you're cared for. I think is the big lesson that keeps me going every day.
I love that. And Shelley Nimi, our principal, consistently talks about our family here in the school district, and that I think that extends far beyond just our staff. That's everybody. And the longer this pandemic drags on, I know the longer students are disconnected from schools, it's going to be harder and harder to get over that hurdle, to get back and to regain that connection, and to reassure them that we got you, we got your back. We know you're going to have gaps. We are still here. We're still waiting for you. We got our arms open, right? And we can't wait to see you again. That's such an important message to send out. So thank you so much for sharing that. Any final thoughts from you, John?
Just ditto. Emma just really encapsulated everything beautifully. I think it's about relationships. Number one, we've known that for many years, in our work, Emma and myself and our colleagues, it comes down to, just knowing, having a really positive, strong relationship with the students and their families and the community. And I see that relationship piece being more recognized now more than ever, the importance of that. So I hope that continues, because, it takes a village to raise a child, and I think it takes our entire education, community to do the best job we can for all of our students. So if we're all, I always say the more adults that are on board in a student's education, the more successful they're going to be. And I wholeheartedly believe that, so if we have everybody on board, pulling together, these kids are going to be in a really good situation, regardless of what, where the gaps might be. We can fill in gaps, but, we can't manufacture relationships.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you both so much for your time this afternoon. It was a really enjoyable conversation, and I feel a good sense moving forward, and with you two involved and the rest of your department, I think the future is looking really bright. So thank you both for your time.
Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you for watching or listening to the show. You can find all of our episodes, leave us a voice message, or send us any questions or comments at our website, shift-ed.ca. Until next time, take care.